Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we are diving into a story that is literally so unbelievable, it honestly feels like a movie plot. We're looking at the absolutely staggering life of Hiroo Onoda. He was a Japanese Imperial Army intelligence officer who flat out refused to believe World War II had ended. I mean, just imagine this for a second. While the rest of the globe was moving on, building new economies, shifting into the Cold War, and way beyond, Onoda spent 29 years hiding in the dense jungles of Lubang Island, in the Philippines. He was actively continuing his own personal guerrilla warfare campaign all the way until 1974. It is a profound, almost terrifying study of human psychology, military conditioning, and extreme survival. To find Lieutenant Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman, in that order. Now, you might be thinking that's a joke, but no, that wasn't some highly classified military extraction brief. That was literally the travel bucket list of a young Japanese university dropout named Norio Suzuki in 1974. I want you to really appreciate the sheer absurdity here. You've got this highly trained, deeply entrenched guerrilla fighter who had evaded full military search parties for decades, and his ultimate discovery was kicked off by a backpacker treating him like a mythological cryptid right next to the abominable snowman. It's just this bizarre twist of fate that finally brought a ghost out of the jungle. Section 1. The Unyielding Orders. December 1944, Lubang Island. Okay, so the Allied forces are rapidly closing in on the Pacific Theater and the Japanese military structure is fragmenting. Enter a 22-year-old second lieutenant Hiroo Onoda. Now, to understand why he did what he did, we gotta look at the orders his commanding officer, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, gave him before he deployed. He said, and I quote, "You are absolutely forbidden to die by your own hand. It may take 3 years, it may take 5, but whatever happens will come back for you. Until then, so long as you have even one soldier, you are to continue to lead him. You may have to live on coconuts and bananas. Under any circumstances, you are not to surrender." Listen, for a 22-year-old officer completely steeped in the absolute code of imperial military loyalty, this wasn't just a quick pep talk. This was a literal, unyielding contract. It locked him into a mindset where surrender simply, completely ceased to exist as an option. Section 2. 30 years a ghost. So, by February 1945, Allied forces completely captured Lubang Island. And Onoda? Well, following his orders to the exact letter, he retreats deep into the unforgiving mountainous jungle. And he wasn't alone. He took 3 fellow soldiers with him, Corporal Shimada, Private Kozuka, and Private Akatsu. They basically transitioned overnight from active-duty military to pure jungle survivalists, keeping themselves alive on stolen rice, bananas, and local cattle, all while maintaining their military gear with meticulous care. But this was not a peaceful hiding period. The decades took a massive, heavy toll. They engaged in sporadic shootouts with local police, totally convinced, well, actually, they believed these were Allied scouts in disguise. In 1944, Onoda lands with 4 soldiers active. But in 1949, Private Akatsu decides he's had enough, escapes, and surrenders, leaving 3. In 1954, Corporal Shimada is tragically killed during an intense skirmish on the beach, leaving just 2. They hold out together for almost 2 more decades, but in 1972, Private Kozuka is shot and killed by local police while burning a farmer's rice silo. So, by 1972, Hiroo Onoda is entirely, profoundly alone. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how on earth did they not know the war was over? Because over the decades, people really tried to tell them. Islanders dropped thousands of leaflets from planes containing official surrender orders, personal letters, even family photos. But Onoda meticulously analyzed and dismissed every single one of them. He assumed the leaflets were just highly elaborate Allied psychological warfare. When they found actual newspapers showing Japan's massive post-war economic boom, Onoda rationalized that it had to be a U.S. puppet government churning out fake news. And when Private Akatsu surrendered in 1949, rather than seeing it as a sign of peace, it just made the remaining men intensely paranoid. They were convinced their position was compromised. It was literally the ultimate tragic confirmation bias. Section 3. The Final Surrender. Jumped in 1974. Miraculously, our university dropout Norio Suzuki actually tracks Onoda down in the deep jungle. But here is where Onoda's conditioning proves completely unbreakable. Even faced with a real, modern Japanese citizen who spoke his language and explained the reality of the world, Onoda stubbornly refused to stand down. Why? Because of those orders from 1944. He insisted he could only legally surrender if he received a direct, face-to-face order from his original commanding officer. So, what does Suzuki do? He flies all the way back to Japan with a mission, and he actually manages to track down Major Yoshimi Taniguchi. But the contrast here is almost comical. Taniguchi wasn't this fierce military leader anymore. He had long since left the military behind and was living this quiet life working as a bookseller. Just picture that for a second. A peaceful, civilian bookseller getting a knock on his door, being recruited to fly back to a tropical jungle to end a 30-year phantom war that he accidentally set in motion as a young major. Wild. Let's walk through exactly how this remarkable moment finally went down. On March 9, 1974, the bookseller-turned-commander flies to Lubang Island, meets Onoda in a designated jungle clearing, and formally reads the official military decampment orders. And the realization finally hits him. Onoda, standing there in his impeccably maintained but totally tattered military uniform, just salutes and openly weeps. He formally relieves himself of duty, handing over his ceremonial samurai sword, 500 rounds of ammunition, and, amazingly, his Arisaka rifle, which, by the way, was still fully functioning after 30 years in a human jungle. Section 4. The Devastating Aftermath. So Onoda returns to Japan as a massive national celebrity. He even writes a best-selling autobiography titled No Surrender, My 30-Year War. But honestly, navigating the jungle was arguably easier for him than navigating society. He experienced absolute culture shock. He had literally hit pause on his life for 1940s imperial values. You know, absolute loyalty, extreme military discipline, self-sacrifice. But he returned to a 1970s modern Japan that he felt was completely hollowed out by rampant consumerism, pacifism, and rapid globalization. He felt so alienated and overwhelmed by this new world that in 1975, he actually packed up and fled again, this time to an isolated ranch in Brazil. He did eventually return to Japan to establish nature camps to teach survival skills to troubled youth, living a long life and passing away in 2014 at the age of 91. But before we wrap up, we absolutely cannot ignore the devastating reality on the ground. 30. While it's incredibly easy to romanticize Onoda's story as this ultimate pinnacle of absolute loyalty and sheer human willpower, 30 represents the approximate number of completely innocent Filipino farmers and local police officers who were killed by Onoda and his men during his unilateral mistaken campaign. And over 100 others were wounded. To put that into perspective, that is an entire community deeply scarred. This was a massive tragedy born of extreme psychological conditioning that cost local islanders dearly. Ultimately, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos recognized the unique, almost brainwashed mental state Onoda was locked into and granted him a full pardon during his formal surrender. But those numbers, 30 dead and over 100 wounded, they remain a permanent dark stain on the legacy of his survival. Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. Where's the line between ultimate loyalty and absolute delusion? Hiroo Onoda's 30-year war is this staggering testament to human endurance, for sure, but it is also a terrifying warning about the power of rigid indoctrination. When does honoring your duty turn into entirely rejecting reality? It's a question that makes this incredible slice of history so profoundly unforgettable. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.